Hi there, and welcome back to In Between Sessions, the podcast where we talk about the many ways we can support our mental health between therapy appointments. I'm your host, Lili Torre. I'm a therapist, podcaster, and lover of any excuse to talk about mental health. Today, I'm joined by Sarah O'Keefe, a trauma therapist currently based in Fort Collins, Colorado. Sarah began her career in Kansas City working with survivors of sexual trauma and has since developed a specialization in helping clients navigate the impact of trauma on their relationship to their bodies. She's certified in EMDR, Level 2 trained in internal family systems, and currently completing her Level 2 training in sensory motor psychotherapy, with a focus on healing attachment trauma through the body. In our conversation, Sarah and I talk about how relationships with our bodies shift and evolve, especially as we age. And I can promise you, of all the heal your relationship with your body advice you've ever heard, this is going to be a different take. We talk about bird watching, spending time with people who are older than you, and even attending a crone circle. Never heard of it? Neither had I. Get ready for a conversation on body image like you've never heard before. I can't wait for you to hear it. So let's get into it. Hi, Sarah O'Keefe. What have you been doing in between sessions?
This is one of the nerdiest things about me, but I've been really into bird watching lately.
I
I
love
don't
that.
remember how I guess, I don't know, maybe since COVID, not really even since COVID, more or less like a couple of years. The place that I live, I like overlook a huge park and stuff. And so there's always like birds and everything outside my windows. And it's been a really interesting, like little hobby, but also just kind of a relaxation thing I've been paying more attention to. And there's so much with that feels really good. But in a short answer, bird watching
I
in
love
between
that.
seconds. Yeah. And what I mean by that really, because like when I'm in my office, I'm obviously not sitting here with my binoculars or anything, but it's like more of just like mindful observing, and birds have been really fascinating to me.
Yeah. How did you go from just being like, oh, there's a bird outside, cool, to like being a full-on bird watcher?
I think like I spend a lot of time outside on my patio, and I don't know, just when I'm sitting out there, or I also like to hike a lot because I live in Colorado.
Mhm.
And if I'm hiking, like a lot of times I'll just pick a moment where I just like stop and kind of sit for a little bit, one to just rest and like breathe. But also it's just nice sometimes, like just like what's going on out here while it's easy for the focus just to be like, I'm going to get this hike done or something, but also like what is out where I am. And
Yeah.
I don't know, just taking more time to really like pay attention. And I don't even know how to answer the question. It's just been more like, oh, that's really interesting, or wanting to learn more about them. And also just like the relaxation that I feel when I'm
Yeah.
watching them is like, I was thinking about this morning, that it's a very like, I don't know what the name of this like skill is necessarily, but just like mindful observing of a thing
Yeah.
without or interacting with it, or without influencing it or impacting it at all, of just watching how things are happening, or like observing the environment around the thing. And I think whatever the name of that skill is also feels very like applicable to mental health stuff too. I do a lot of IFS in my work with clients, and part of like getting to know our parts is that whatever that skill is of like mindful observing without judgment or influence or anything, just kind of getting to know it objectively can help us like understand it more, and I think is more of a path to more self-compassion when we can like see ourselves as just these beings that are existing in an environment. So I don't know, watching birds, it's like it's relaxing. It's kind of fun because I always like learning about new topics. And so that's been really interesting, just learning about different, like I have two different favorite birds now, and I don't know. It just sounds really nerdy, but whatever. But yeah, just like observing what they're doing and how they're impacted and why they might be doing what they're doing. I don't know.
Yeah. I love the connection to parts work in IFS. For anyone who's listening who doesn't know, can you speak a little bit about what IFS is?
Yeah, IFS stands for Internal Family Systems Therapy, which sounds like a family therapy, but it's not necessarily. It's kind of getting to know the quote unquote family of parts that we all have. So we all have different types of parts that show up in different situations to help us like get through whatever situation we're in. And these parts kind of take on roles throughout our life at points when it felt really necessary or it felt really helpful at the time. Whether they're actually still effective or helpful today is kind of beside the point, but just kind of
Yeah.
getting to know like, why does this part always show up, when whatever is happening, or what's the story behind it? How long has it been around? What, just to kind of understand like what's the purpose of what you're doing, and how was that helpful at some point? And the parts, I guess, that we are usually getting to know are called different protector parts.
Mhm.
And the idea of IFS is getting to know our protector parts to build more like connection with them or more relationship with them so that we feel in ourselves like we have more, I don't want to use the word control. That's not the word I'm looking for, but more like agency, I guess, in
Yeah.
our life rather than having these reactions that are all of a sudden just happening versus how we want to show up. When we can get to know our parts, it helps us have, again, more self compassion for like what we've been through, and everything usually makes sense. All of our protector parts in some way are moving us toward a sense of soothing or comfort or towards a sense of safety or away from something that feels dangerous or stressful. So the intention is always good. The impact doesn't always mean that it's actually helpful or effective, but again, once we can get to know them, we can kind of help these parts find ways to be more effective. And the purpose of all of them is to protect us from getting hurt again,
Right.
basically. And so when we can build relationship with our protective parts, a lot of times we then can have more access to whatever the wound or the pain is underneath there. And ideally, we can help release that pain from a very compassionate, mindful, like attuned place that feels safe for all of our parts and really whole. So it's really cool stuff. I do IFS like purely sometimes with clients, and sometimes I incorporate it with other therapies as well. But there's a lot of aspects of IFS that feel very like, I don't know, just useful in how we move through life in general.
Yeah. And I love that kind of comparison that you're making between the skill of just sort of objectively observing a bird in this example and as kind of like training for objectively observing our parts. I also use IFS work with my clients. And one way that I've been using it recently, and this was actually inspired by my own therapist in my work in therapy, is being super intentional with self care by sort of directing our acts of self care to specific parts. So, like for me, when I know that I'm going to be in a lot of spaces that require me to be like pretty extroverted, if I have a lot of like social events coming up, I'm, an extroverted introvert and I, only have so much bandwidth for that amount of social activity. And so for me, when I'm anticipating a lot of social interaction, I will do something for that introverted part, maybe like the morning of. So, like going on a walk by myself and being in nature and listening to birds. And I actively say inside my own head, like, hey, introverted part, like, this is for you. I'm doing this for you right now. Like, enjoy this. This is your moment. And I'm thinking of that because I'm sort of having the thought that there might be a part of you that needs kind of this relationship with nature and who finds some healing of some kind by observing these birds and listening to them. And so this idea of kind of objective and mindful observation is healing to some part of you.
Totally. I love the like, hey, or whatever you said, hey, this is for you, introverted part,
Yeah.
I think you
Yeah.
said. Because when we get to know our parts, like just keeping that connection or that relationship going is like, it feels really, it sounds weird to say, but like our parts really appreciate knowing that we are aware of them or that we're
Yes.
for them or we're thinking of them. Like that feels really, really good and increases our sense of like just internal safety, really,
Yeah.
too. But yeah, in terms of like, how does birding relate to like my own kind of healing? Like, one, it is just like a fun hobby, and I really like learning new things. And also, outside of like the kind of mindful observing piece of it, I do, and that I think that just doing that in nature, whether it's focused on birds or whatever, has always helped me feel more grounded and calm. Like if I can do something outside, whatever it is, like has always been really helpful for me. And in my new hyperfixation of birding in the birding world and stuff, I joined a bird watching club in my community, which is just like the most wholesome and adorable like thing that
Yeah, it sounds amazing.
because it truly is all like people of age that are retired and me. So it's been interesting, like one being around people who are older than myself, like with just a fun hobby, a shared thing that we all have in common of like we all think this is pretty cool and interesting, but also like part of the this bird watching club, other than like learning more and I don't know, connecting with other people who get really excited about this same thing, is that sometimes we'll go on what's called field trips, quote unquote, of like we'll meet on a certain trail, and the goal of the hike, I'm putting that in heavy quotes because it's not usually a long hike, but the goal of the hike is to like we're looking for a certain species of bird, or like maybe
Yeah.
it's a season where this type of bird is they're like they're going to be seen more in this area because of migration patterns or their nesting or whatever. And so like we're getting outside together, and it's like an active thing that has been an interesting way of just like doing something active with diverse bodies, and
Yeah.
specifically age, has been really, I'm going to say surprising, because not because it's like who would have thought that would be helpful, but like surprising as in like this was not my intention with this activity
Right.
whatsoever, but surprisingly helpful in like some of my own, body stuff. I work a lot with in my work like survivors of sexual violence, and I also do a lot of work with people trying to heal their relationship to their body, whether that means after trauma or body image, which is a giant umbrella topic that can mean a lot of things. But like what drew me to that work is I have, personal experience with some of those things. And it's part of why I'm so passionate about that work, but also, yeah, just helping people find non-violent ways to be connected to their body or and be in relation to their body.
Yeah.
So, yeah, being around older people doing something active where there's no goal of like how far are we going or how fast are we doing it or how many calories or whatever, that's not the focus whatsoever. It's just being in a sense of like wonder and joy, and you also happen to be moving your body, and like we go
Yeah.
at a pace that feels safe for everybody so that we can just really enjoy the time of doing it. And yeah, there's been something really healing about that I didn't really see coming, but has been really nice.
That's so beautiful. I love the idea of wonder and just joy and, this idea of joyful movement. That movement is not about like punishing yourself or, earning your next meal or whatever. And I also love the idea of, you talked about body image as like a huge kind of umbrella topic. And I think an aspect of body image that's not really talked about enough is age, is, how ageism impacts our body image. We think of body image work a lot about being like the size and the shape of our body, but it almost feels like we don't talk about aging as much because it's almost considered like a given that you shouldn't want to age, that you shouldn't want your body to reflect age. Like that's just normal, but the rest of body image work can be worked through in therapy. And so I can see how this could sort of, this experience of being around older people with a shared interest could sort of illuminate new insights about that for you.
Totally. And I've been thinking a lot about just the concept of, this sounds really broad, but like the concept of violence, like violence that is so normalized towards bodies all of the time. And I'm not necessarily meaning like the obvious like physical violence or sexual violence, or like, I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about the very like micro moments of violence in terms of like with aging, when anytime someone says anything about how old someone is, there's an immediately like several jokes that are really rooted in like internalized shame of like aging is bad or getting older is bad. And so therefore we make a joke about it because everybody knows it's true that it's bad. When we look at that objectively, it's like, that's actually so weird. Like, why
Mhm.
do we do that? Because aging isn't bad. And yeah, it's just a thing that like it's going to happen to every single person that is alive. And so I don't know, it's just kind of an interesting thing that is so normalized and like breezed over really quickly. That's like, wait, what are we doing? What are we doing there? What's that about? And right now, I'm 35. A lot of people wouldn't put me in a category of being considered quote unquote old, except for like, my like college aged clients or like kids or something
Sure.
like I sound old, I guess. But like in the grand scheme of thing, like I'm not old. And it seems like maybe exploring our relationship to aging earlier on potentially provides space for like a healthier relationship to our body as we eventually do,
Yeah.
get older or whatever. Because it feels like aging doesn't become much of a topic until you are older or like later in life or something, or when like your body starts changing in the ways that are considered bad or like invaluable or something.
Yeah.
And so it's just been interesting, like exploring my relationship to aging as a semi young person. I'm hoping that, as my body does get older and changes with age and stuff, that like I'll have a much healthier relationship to it because I've already unpacked a lot of the internalized ageism, shame, or whatever.
Yeah.
And with the jokes or whatever about like, oh, I'm not going to tell you my age, or like,
Mhm. I'm turning 39 again.
yeah, like, yeah, exactly. Like somehow it needs to be a secret,
Hmm.
however old you actually are. Not that I realize like using the term violent is seems kind of extreme for that, but like I'm thinking in terms of like with diet culture when we're constantly like, "Ugh, my body like should be this size or look this way. It should be able to do this activity," or like I just need to push through or like force myself to get up and like should, push, force. These are all like violent words,
Yeah.
that's so normalized to be using in the way that we communicate with ourselves internally. And I'm also not saying this to shame anyone. Like we all struggle with that just because that's the culture that we live in, but something to just be aware of like, how powerful those words actually can be. And I think, I don't know, looking at the body from like an aging perspective or like just across the length of a lifetime, it's a completely different perspective of like, how do I want my body to feel when I'm 90? I don't know. Or like, this is totally random, but the a yoga teacher that I used to have when I lived in Kansas City, we were talking one time about like the use of props in a yoga class. And in some yoga spaces, like I'm hoping this is changing, I don't know, but in some yoga spaces, it's like there's an unspoken air of like you need to be small and bendy and like be able to, force your body into these little poses that the teacher is able to do and not use props because that
Yeah.
means that the modified version is for like it supposedly means something. And I just want to challenge that like, in yoga specifically, or really any movement practice should be like, how is my body feeling today? And how can I do this movement today unattached to any of the societal rules or expectations about how this is quote unquote supposed to be? Yeah, just kind of like rethinking your relationship to like movement or like how your body is just like existing in the world.
Yeah.
I don't know. Oh, but sorry, yoga props, but like use props, like because one thing that she said was like, you want to be 90 years old and still able to do this. And so use props, like so that you're able to not get injured or not push yourself too far or
Yeah.
like it's to be a meaningful practice.
Yeah. I have So many thoughts about what you just shared. I mean, going back a little bit, you mentioned being 35. I'm turning 35 this year, and you were saying, like, in the grand scheme of things, that's relatively young. And what's funny is it just shows how like relative these numbers and these ideas are. What first came to mind for me is that 35 is sort of has for women this number on it of geriatric pregnancy. And so it's like the first time that we're referred to as geriatric in any way, shape, or form. I mean, I'm not pregnant, but I'm thinking about, when we talk about the biological clock, that seems to be kind of a timer that goes off for a lot of people and sort of one of those first confrontations of age. And you mentioned that it's kind of something that we like start more directly talking about as people get a little bit older. And I agree with that. But also at the same time, I do feel like I've seen a shift where now you're hearing about things like I think they call it like preventative Botox, of like get Botox in your 20s to prevent wrinkles from happening in the first place. And I know there's been a lot of conversation around kind of changing the term of anti-aging products, but like how normalized has that term been where like you don't even I, as somebody who works a lot with body image, used that word forever and didn't really think about it because it's just what we call it. And then, kind of realizing like, oh my gosh, like talk about violence, anti-aging is, so stigmatizing and so full of prejudice. And so I think the example that you gave of accommodations like props in yoga is a great example of meeting your body where you're at, and that some of the stigma around it is that we associate the use of props with being old and, inflexible and incapable. And there is kind of shame and stigma around that. And so it's also, an act of advocacy to use props when you feel like that's most supportive for you because you're giving other people permission to do it as well.
Yeah, I think like when I was saying the conversation of aging isn't coming, but like the conversation of anti-aging definitely comes
Yeah.
on extremely early.
Yeah.
It's just like we don't even want to talk about aging. Let's talk about how to make sure we never get there.
Yes, it's like keep it from happening, but it is ultimately inevitable. But we're not going to talk about that until you reach the point where inevitability has hit. And then we'll kind of admit, like, oh, yeah, like it was inevitable.
Yeah, right. So it's and also like all of the anti-aging stuff. It's like anything to prevent, like this is a bigger topic, but just like anything to prevent what's inevitably going to happen to our body. And
Hmm.
the inevitable changes that our body will go through, whether it's weight or ability or whatever. And all of that is kind of in a sense like violence on our body of just like trying to stop what's just natural.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking a lot of just like where we are in the world, where we've been in the world and where we are in the world today of just like so much focus on dominance and control and like power over
Yeah.
in some ways that we could talk for hours about that, but like specific to body image, so much of those topics are kind of what lead all of this, like anti-aging, some of that is has to do with like desirability politics and yeah, it's just like who's benefiting from all of these efforts really. I don't know if you've read The Body's Not an Apology by Sonya Renee Taylor.
Yeah. It's
And
such a great book.
yeah, and one I like recommend to a lot of people and something that she says in that book, which I'm sure I will misquote somehow, but she's talking about like like shame that we hold about our body and like who's actually benefiting from our shame, from our
Yeah.
body shame. And it's not us, it's like these bigger oppressive systems that are, we're giving our money to or giving power to, or not really that we're giving power to, but we're taking power from us. But yeah, it's like who benefits from this shame that we've internalized to just be true,
Yeah.
even though it's not, but it's like it's been so normalized that it's internalized to just be true and fact. And it's really, it creates a really challenging life for our body to just like be able to exist and to have a good relationship to it.
Yeah. That's making me think of I think it's Fleabag, right? Where she says, like, she's terrified of losing the currency of youth.
Mhm.
And that's something I think about a lot, that in our culture, it is a currency. It is valued. It is something like, no wonder we cling to it. No wonder we want to keep ourselves from aging. But as we've said many times, it is an inevitability and it's also a privilege. There's so much that comes with age that we don't really talk about or value in our culture, like wisdom, lived experience, broader perspectives. And we just don't really value that in the elderly. And so I'm kind of curious about your experience, joining this bird watching group and being with a bunch of folks who are older than you. I guess first, what was that like for you when you first joined? And then what do you feel like you've learned from them and from that experience?
Yeah, I think when I first joined, it's been interesting because like I genuinely enjoy it, and like I've made some friends like being in the group, and it feels like, again, I like very just wholesome and cute to be like making friendships with people that were like bonding over this like hobby, I guess. But also like learning about their lives and things like that is just like it's nice to get different perspectives on just like life experience and things like that. This along with like other things too, but like have really just shifted my perspective on like life and like my time here. I don't know how to explain that, but like
Yeah.
so much of body image, and not all the time, but sometimes with disordered eating, the focus is like very much like here now.
Mm. Yeah.
How am I perceived right now? What's wrong with me right now? Like it's just very now focus. I mean, diet, that's the whole thing of diet culture, is like very now focus. It's like, who cares about the side effects later on? I need to
Right.
be thin right now. That's kind of the overall like anything to get to that goal, right? And it's very just here and now focus. And I think it's helped shift my perspective to like the bigger pic, like what are we doing while we're here for the whole time, I
Yeah.
guess. And I think a lot of people can relate, just feeling like the world feels like a very scary, uncertain place right now, and like who knows what the future is going to look like. And I've been having a lot of thoughts about the future and life in general, and what is it going to look like kind of while we're here? What will it look like 10 years, 20 years down the road if we're still here, but not to
Mhm.
be fear mongering or whatever, but like just life in general. And in terms of like, how do I want my body to feel? How do I want my body to, what do I want it to be able to do? What relationship do I want to have with it? I think thinking in that bigger, like zoomed out perspective has really softened a lot of like, I've done a lot of work on my own body image stuff
Yeah.
and, healing from disordered eating and things like that. And this, aging kind of like topic has even deepened a lot of those things, where on top of the progress that I had already made, but just like it's softened a lot even more so around like, what's the purpose of all of this kind of, you know, while we're here, we want to at least feel as connected to ourselves as we can, if that's possible. And I'm hoping that, like, for as long as I live, however long that will be, that my body feels like as comfortable and as at ease as it's able to. And I know that, may not be always the case, of course, but like, if there's ways I can soften certain edges around my relationship to it, that just feels a lot better. Again, kind of while we're here. I don't know where that phrase keeps coming up.
Yeah.
I also there's a practitioner at the yoga studio that I go to that leads something called a crone circle.
Yeah.
And I've over the years like kind of go in phases of like coming back to like exploring this particular archetype of the crone, which if people aren't familiar, it's like kind of the final of the three like maiden mother crone archetype, and it's sort of this like symbol, I guess, that we see across cultures and across stories and media now and things like that. So the crone archetype is often like the older woman, and like, for example, in like Snow White or something. So the the old like wrinkly lady in the cloak that prevents or presents the apple and
Feel like they're often witches of some kind. Like I'm also thinking of like Rapunzel, and then like her mom, who I think dies, and then there's like an old witch who like steals her, like, and why does the mom always die? Like, all
yeah,
these
that's like
archetypes.
a weird Disney thing, I think. I don't know. But yeah, like the crone archetype, I think a lot of times in media is shown as like this old, like wrinkly,
Yeah.
ugly, isolated, like person that like lives alone in the woods and she's always, doing magical secret things or whatever.
And usually an obsession with youth of some kind.
Yeah. Which actually is anti actually what the crone archetype is all about.
Yeah. Yeah. I think in a lot of our stories, I keep thinking about like Hocus Pocus, like they're trying to steal youth from the children. And I feel like that's common in these stories.
Yeah, and I think that's some of this like focus of anti-aging even like applied to the crone archetype, which is not even about that.
Yeah.
It's like stuff that we're putting on, like
Yeah. Projecting onto her.
yeah, like the crone archetype actually is just this like, old, has a lot of wisdom and experience and has in many ways kind of rejected a lot of societal expectations around like how
Mm.
what your life quote unquote should be, or like rejected a lot of like beauty standards, or like has outgrown that, as just like living in this like this whole other chapter away from these shoulds and supposed tos. And in a lot of ways that's extremely inspirational to me, of just like what if the norm that we're supposed to all be ashamed of all of these things and it's bad was actually like that's not true. What if that whole topic was like actually a really vibrant, exciting part of life that was seen as really valued and relevant. And so I think also like learning about that archetype over the years and stuff has also helped kind of like shift a perspective again on like bodies over time and value. Like, I don't know, who decides why bodies have value or who decides which bodies have value, like who benefits from that? Again, not us, but I think it's helped like really untangle a lot of these like obvious and less obvious things that we're just supposed to internalize and assume are true about our bodies.
Yeah, I like the idea of like reclaiming this archetype rather than internalizing the way it's been reflected back to us through media that, let's be honest, was mostly created by men. I like the idea of reclaiming this era of life kind of post reproduction, like being post reproductive age when your value, if all that a woman is valued for is A, being sexy, and B, bearing children, which are, of course, interrelated. When a woman is beyond childbearing age, what becomes of her value? And so I love this idea of sort of reclaiming that as its own unique and special energy and wisdom that has value and has a place in our culture.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful. And coming back to the when you were saying like after childbearing age or so, like even with that, it's like once your body has no perceived like value in terms of like how it benefits somebody else.
Mhm.
Yeah, and then it's like after that, once your body doesn't have that perceived value, it's like, well, then you're kind of irrelevant. And
Yeah. Invisible.
yeah, unfuckable is kind of a term that
Yes.
there's a podcast I'll share about in a second, but that she had talked about that. Yeah, that it's like we're told that like our value is these certain things and we have to uphold that to our best ability. And if we can't, then we're kind of useless to society. And
Yeah.
so, anyways, yeah, I think being around people of different ages and not just being around them, but like relationships with them and friendships with them, like has helped soften a lot of these and help just untangle a lot more of these like messages that we receive, whether explicitly or implicitly.
Yeah.
And we don't even realize that we took on. They just were placed in our lap when we were little, and we've just taken this like, yep, okay, this is true, I guess.
Yeah, and what I love about this is you like you were saying like your friendships with them and that you are in these groups as like a peer. I think a lot of how we talk about or we experience interacting with the elderly or older people is like through caring for them. And of course, like older people deserve our care. Absolutely. I'm certainly not saying otherwise. But going to like a retirement home or facility and like volunteering there and like doing activities there. And, all of that is certainly important and noble. And I'm all for that. But I think that is very like one track minded. It sees people older than us as just kind of, one thing, which is just like needy of your care.
There's still like a barrier of like a relationship. There's still like a we're in different roles doing
Hmm.
this thing versus like we're just here enjoying each other's time, and like I see you as a full person who I want to be around, or like I value your opinion or
Yeah. And we have a shared interest. There is commonality between us.
actual friendship versus like a transactional.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's something special about that. And I think that's kind of like rare. I haven't heard of people like having that opportunity a ton or like that just being a thing that people talk about. Again, like I genuinely mostly hear about people's relationships with older folks as being like, oh yeah, I visit them or I care for them or whatever. And there's kind of like a power imbalance there. And so I think recognizing the power of this population of people and the wisdom of this population of people, the worth, and counting yourself, like lucky to get to be around them and enjoy that time with them again as a peer with a shared interest, I think is what's so cool and unique and special about what you're describing.
Yeah, there's a difference of like this power imbalance versus like I actually see you, you're a full person, and
Yeah.
I want to spend time with you, or I want to know your perspective on things. I think a lot of like ageism is very much like, well, I guess for people socialized as women is different than for people socialized as men as aging progresses, but in general society, the way that they value your perspective shifts a lot
Hmm.
based on how old you are. And I don't know. I think I've been thinking a lot in this hour of like one of my closest friends is like, I don't even know how old she is, like 20 something years older than me. And we talk on the phone like once a week or once every 2 weeks. And she's one of my closest friends. And we met like in a working, like we used to be coworkers. And I think that's a like workspaces are a lot of ways that friendships like that can develop, but outside spaces like that, it's like there's not really a lot of like, at least not that I am aware of, I guess. But in this group, this bird watching group, it's like it's been another way of like, just hanging out with people that are different than me, which I think is important across the board.
Yeah.
I was also thinking about like just in terms of body image or like challenging any type of bias that you have is like an important piece of working on that is like exposure to diversity, right? Like I'm thinking of in terms of body image and aging is like on social media, for example, I follow a lot of different types of bodies or creators with different types of bodies. And there's a few accounts I've followed. I don't know off the top of my head, but just like people who are older that are just like doing stuff and living their life. And it's, I don't think it's as like as consciously happening all of the time. But as I see accounts like that, I'm like, oh, they're just living their life. They seem happy and like,
Right.
it's not all about like, oh, I'm how hard aging is and how like we have to, buy all here's all these products to stop it from happening, but like how powerful you just to see people just living their life in peace and they happen to be older. Like
Yeah.
where the focus isn't on anti-aging, it's just on like, oh, you're just a person existing and living your life, and that's really lovely.
Yeah. And there can be a lot of joy in aging as well. Yeah, I guess if anyone's listening to this and is like, okay, like this all sounds really interesting to me, but they're sort of like, I don't really know like where to go from here or where I would start. Are there any like resources, podcasts, anything that you would recommend either in like the body image space, the anti-ageism space, or like as it pertains to bird watching.
Sure. Yeah. So with like aging, for example, there was a podcast. I don't know if you've heard of Virginia Soul Smith. She has a podcast, Burnt Toast.
Burnt toast?
Burnt Toast. She's kind of in the healing disordered eating body image field, but I think she also focuses on parenthood and stuff too, I don't relate to that, but I like some of her episodes that are focused on the other things too. But there's a podcast episode with someone named Deborah Binfield, who is a dietitian, I believe, that specializes in disordered eating, but also she has a special focus on like aging as well. So there's an episode that's called You're Not Considered a Whole Person After a Certain Age. That was the title of it. That episode was really, really good. I've listened to it like 3 times or something.
Wow, yeah.
I always recommend the book, The Body's Not an Apology by Sonya Renee Taylor. Also, I don't know if you've heard of the book Rest is Resistance by Tricia Hersey.
No.
It's more kind of like anti-capitalist, but so much of that overlaps with everything that we're talking about today, and just like helping, again, like untangle all these internalized capitalism messages and how that impacts what your life looks like and how your relationship to yourself is, but also like learning to actually rest in a world that is kind of anti that.
Yeah, for sure.
And there's a TED Talk by Ashton Applewhite called Let's End Ageism. It was pretty good. It's like 11 or 12 minutes. And anyways, those are the main ones that come to mind. And then in terms of bird watching, the bird watching club or whatever, there's a organization called the Audubon Society, and they have different chapters in cities all over the place. The chapter that I'm in recently changed our name to Northern Colorado Bird Alliance, or something like that. But audubon.org is where you can find any like chapters near you, or like they all have social media accounts with more local information based on wherever you are. But yeah, it's just been kind of I always like learning about new things. So it's fun to learn other people about that. So
awesome. I'll link all of those in the show notes for sure. Sarah, I've so enjoyed talking to you, and I'm curious, what are you going to do before your next session?
I have like 2 hours before my next client, actually. So I am going to find something to eat for lunch, and it's really nice outside. So honestly, I'll probably will be like sitting on my patio, whether birds are around or not, but just sitting outside and like just taking some time before I have to get back to work. So slowing down that's my goal.
I love that. That sounds amazing. I may do the same. Thank you so much for being on the In Between Sessions podcast. I really enjoyed talking to you, and I appreciate your time.
Yeah, this has been really fun, and I love conversations like this. So thank you for having me.
That conversation felt like a breath of fresh mountain air, thoughtful, spacious, and full of insight. I so appreciated Sarah's thoughts on how we can gently reconnect with our bodies, not through pressure or performance, but through presence, curiosity, and connection with the world around us. I've linked all of the resources that Sarah shared with us in the show notes, as well as her contact info if you'd like to reach out to her or know someone in the Colorado area who would benefit from working with her. If today's episode got you thinking about your own relationship with your body, or gave you a new perspective on aging, embodiment, or even bird watching, I'd love for you to share it with a friend or a loved one, or leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Take care, and I'll see you next time in between sessions.